There are places on Earth where the usual rules seem to bend, where compasses spin without reason, where entire communities share memories of lights in the sky and missing hours they cannot account for. Rural Alaska is one such place. For decades, residents of isolated villages have reported encounters that defy explanation. Objects moving silently across the tundra, people waking miles from their homes with no memory of how they got there. And always, the lights. Brilliant, soundless, and utterly wrong. What follows is an account drawn from official reports, witness testimonies, and interviews conducted over the past 40 years. The names are real. The events are documented. And the questions they raise have never been answered. Alaska is a land of extremes. It covers over 6,650,000 square miles, making it larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Yet fewer than 750,000 people live within its borders. Most of Alaska remains untouched wilderness. Vast stretches of tundra, dense forests, and mountain ranges extend for hundreds of miles without a single road or settlement. The winter months bring near total darkness to the northern regions. For weeks at a time, the sun never rises above the horizon. Summer brings the opposite, continuous daylight that makes it impossible to distinguish noon from midnight without a clock. The Inuit and Athabascan peoples have inhabited these lands for thousands of years. Their oral traditions speak of beings that came from the sky, not spirits or gods in the traditional sense, but physical entities that moved between the stars and the earth. The Inuit elders describe them as the sky people, beings who could travel great distances in moments and possessed knowledge beyond human understanding. These stories were passed down through generations long before European contact, long before anyone had heard of UFOs or alien abductions. The modern wave of sightings began in the 1960s. As Alaska achieved statehood in 1959, military installations expanded across the territory. Radar stations were built to monitor Soviet aircraft movements during the Cold War. Remote listening posts dotted the landscape. Personnel stationed at these facilities began reporting anomalies, objects on radar that moved at impossible speeds. Visual sightings of disc-shaped craft hovering over the tundra. At first, these reports were classified. The military assumed they were dealing with advanced Soviet technology, but the patterns didn't fit. The objects showed no interest in military targets. Instead, they appeared most frequently over small, isolated villages. Nome, a coastal city in western Alaska with a population of just over 3,500, became a focal point for these encounters. Between 1960 and 2004, the FBI documented over 20 unsolved disappearances in and around Nome. The actual number is likely higher. Many cases in remote Alaska go unreported. The victims came from all backgrounds: Inuit hunters, white settlers, seasonal workers. What they had in common was the location. All vanished within a 100-mile radius of Nome. In 1972, a hunting party from the village of Shishmaref set out across the ice. 4 men, all experienced trackers familiar with the dangers of Arctic hunting. They took supplies for 3 days and a radio for emergencies. When they failed to return after a week, search teams were dispatched. The men's snowmobiles were found intact 30 miles from the village. The engines were cold but functional. Food and supplies sat undisturbed in the storage compartments, but the men themselves were gone. No tracks led away from the machines, no signs of struggle, no blood. The snow around the snowmobiles was pristine, as if the men had simply ceased to exist mid-journey. 1 month later, 2 of the hunters reappeared. They were found wandering near the village, disoriented and suffering from hypothermia. When questioned, neither could explain where they had been. Both men reported the same thing. They remembered seeing a light, bright and pulsing. Then nothing. They woke up on the tundra with no memory of the intervening weeks. Medical examinations showed they were malnourished and dehydrated. But their injuries were not consistent with exposure. They should have been dead. The other 2 hunters were never found. Similar incidents continued throughout the 1970s. In 1975, a family of 5 disappeared from their home outside Fairbanks. The house was locked from the inside. A meal sat half-eaten on the kitchen table. The family's truck remained in the driveway. Neighbors reported seeing strange lights hovering over the property the night before. When police arrived, they found the door still bolted shut. The family was gone. No forced entry, no signs of violence, just an empty house and 5 missing people. 3 years later, the eldest daughter turned up in Anchorage, over 350 miles away. She had no identification and no memory of her name. When authorities matched her fingerprints to the missing persons case, she was brought in for questioning. She could not explain how she reached Anchorage. She could not remember her family. But she described the same thing others had reported: a light, a sensation of floating, and then nothing. The most extensively documented case occurred in October 1986. Dr. Abigail Tyler, a psychologist based in Nome, began treating several patients who complained of severe insomnia and recurring nightmares. The patients did not know each other. They came from different parts of the region, but their symptoms were identical. They woke each night at exactly the same time. They described feeling watched, and they all shared disturbing dreams of a white owl staring through their bedroom windows. Dr. Tyler used hypnosis to help her patients explore the source of their anxiety. What emerged was far more disturbing than simple nightmares. Under hypnosis, the patients described encounters with non-human entities. They spoke of being paralyzed in their beds, of lights flooding their rooms, of being lifted through walls or ceilings and transported to enclosed spaces. The descriptions were remarkably consistent: gray-skinned beings with large heads and dark eyes, sterile examination rooms filled with instruments, procedures performed on their bodies, and always the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Dr. Tyler recorded these sessions on audio and videotape. The recordings show her patients becoming increasingly distressed as they recalled these experiences. In several cases, the patients began speaking in languages they did not know. Linguistic experts later identified fragments of ancient Sumerian among the vocalizations. One patient, Tommy Fisher, became so agitated during a session that he had to be sedated. The video shows him screaming that they were in the room, that they were taking him again. He thrashed against the restraints, eyes wide with terror. Dr. Tyler attempted to calm him, but Fisher's fear only intensified. He shouted that the owls were not owls, that they were something else wearing a disguise. Moments later, the recording cuts to static. When the video resumes, Fisher is unconscious. Dr. Tyler appears shaken. She states for the record that something interfered with the equipment, that the lights in the room dimmed and the temperature dropped. Fisher never regained consciousness. He died 3 days later from what was officially ruled a stroke. Dr. Tyler's own experiences began shortly after Fisher's death. She reported seeing the white owl outside her window. At first, she dismissed it as a manifestation of stress. But the sightings continued. She began experiencing missing time, hours she could not account for. She would find herself in different parts of her house with no memory of moving. Her young daughter, Ashley, began having nightmares. The child drew pictures of figures with large eyes standing at the foot of her bed. Dr. Tyler's concern grew when she discovered strange marks on Ashley's body, small, perfectly circular burns that appeared overnight. In November 1986, Dr. Tyler decided to undergo hypnosis herself. A colleague, Dr. Campos, conducted the session. The recording of this session has been the subject of intense scrutiny. Under hypnosis, Dr. Tyler described being taken from her home. She spoke of floating through her bedroom ceiling and being transported to a craft. She described the interior as impossibly large, rooms that seemed to shift and change. And she described the beings themselves. They communicated without speaking. Thoughts appeared directly in her mind. They told her things about the universe, about humanity's place in it, about experiments they had been conducting for thousands of years. The most chilling part of the recording comes near the end. Dr. Tyler becomes silent. Her breathing slows. When she speaks again, her voice has changed. It is deeper, monotone. She begins reciting a series of numbers and coordinates. Dr. Campos attempts to bring her out of the trance, but she continues speaking. The language shifts. English blends with something else, something ancient and guttural. Then the recording ends abruptly. Dr. Campos later stated that the equipment malfunctioned, that he had no explanation for what occurred. After this session, Dr. Tyler's behavior changed. She became withdrawn. She stopped treating patients. She moved with her daughter to a secure location and refused interviews. Her case files were seized by federal authorities. The official explanation was that the materials were needed for an ongoing investigation, but no investigation was ever made public. The tapes remain classified. Attempts to access them through Freedom of Information Act requests have been denied on grounds of national security. The Tyler case brought national attention to Nome. Journalists descended on the small city. They interviewed residents and documented their stories. What they found was a community living in fear. Multiple families reported similar experiences: missing time, strange marks, encounters with lights in the sky. Some spoke openly, others refused to go on record. The fear of ridicule was real, but so was the fear of the phenomena itself. Because for many residents, the encounters were ongoing. In 1997, a commercial pilot named Paul Jensen reported an encounter while flying between Nome and Kotzebue. He was maintaining an altitude of 8,000 feet when his instruments began malfunctioning. The compass spun wildly. Radio communication filled with static. Then he saw it, a metallic disc hovering alongside his aircraft. It was massive, easily 300 feet in diameter, perfectly smooth with no visible seams or markings. The object paced his plane for several minutes before accelerating vertically and vanishing from sight. Jensen filed an official report with the FAA. He was a decorated pilot with over 20 years of experience. He had never reported anything unusual before. The FAA acknowledged his report, but provided no explanation. Ground witnesses corroborated Jensen's account. Multiple residents of Nome reported seeing a large object in the sky that evening. Photographs were taken, though the quality was poor. The object appeared as a bright light against the darkness. Video footage showed something moving at high speed before disappearing. Skeptics argued it was a meteor or military aircraft. But meteors don't pace commercial planes, and military aircraft don't move vertically at impossible speeds. The military's presence in Alaska has always been significant. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson near Anchorage houses thousands of personnel. Eielson Air Force Base near Fairbanks serves as a strategic location for Arctic operations. The military conducts regular exercises across the state. This has led some to suggest that UFO sightings are simply misidentified military craft, experimental aircraft being tested in remote areas. But this explanation falls apart under scrutiny. Military aircraft leave radar signatures. They produce sound, they don't cause mass disappearances or missing time, and they certainly don't paralyze people in their beds. Former military personnel have occasionally come forward with their own accounts. In 2003, retired Air Force Sergeant David Morrison spoke to researchers about his experiences at a radar installation near Barrow. He described tracking objects that moved at speeds exceeding 1,000,000 miles per hour, objects that changed direction instantaneously, objects that appeared and disappeared without warning. Morrison stated that such incidents were common, but never officially acknowledged. Personnel were instructed to log them as equipment malfunctions. When pressed about the nature of these objects, Morrison was clear. They were not ours, they were not Russian, they were something else entirely. The indigenous communities of Alaska have their own perspective on these events. For them, the encounters are not new, they are part of a continuum that stretches back generations. Elders speak of relatives who were taken by the Sky People and returned changed. Some came back with knowledge they shouldn't possess. Others never came back at all. The Inuit tradition includes protocols for dealing with these beings. Offerings are left. Certain areas are avoided after dark. And above all, one does not speak the names of those who were taken. To speak their names is to invite attention. In 2009, a documentary filmmaker attempted to investigate the Nome disappearances. He interviewed dozens of residents. He examined police reports and medical records. The resulting film claimed to present evidence of a massive cover-up. It suggested that authorities knew far more than they admitted. The film was controversial. Critics accused the filmmaker of fabricating evidence and exploiting a community's trauma. But the residents who participated stood by their accounts. They insisted that what they experienced was real, that the fear was real, and that something in the skies above Alaska continued to take people. The scientific community remains divided. Mainstream researchers dismiss abduction accounts as sleep paralysis, false memories, or psychological trauma. They point to the lack of physical evidence, the absence of recovered alien technology, the implausibility of interstellar travel. But a small number of scientists take the reports seriously. They note the consistency of accounts across cultures and decades. They point to physical effects like radiation burns and implant scars. They acknowledge that current understanding of physics may be incomplete, that what seems impossible today might be explained tomorrow. One researcher, Dr. Richard Nolan, a historian at the University of Rochester, has studied the Alaska cases extensively. He argues that the sheer volume of reports cannot be dismissed. That credible witnesses, including pilots, law enforcement, and medical professionals, have documented encounters that defy conventional explanation. Nolan suggests that Alaska's unique geography makes it an ideal location for such phenomena. The sparse population provides privacy, the extreme environment limits oversight, and the indigenous population has long-standing traditions that acknowledge non-human intelligence. Physical evidence remains elusive, but not entirely absent. Soil samples from landing sites show unusual isotopic ratios. Vegetation in certain areas displays accelerated or stunted growth patterns without clear cause. And there are the objects themselves. Small metallic fragments recovered from encounter sites that resist conventional analysis. Their composition includes elements in ratios not found in nature. Their crystalline structure suggests manufacturing techniques beyond current capability. These fragments sit in university labs and private collections. They are studied and debated but never definitively explained. The psychological impact on witnesses is profound. Many suffer from PTSD-like symptoms, sleep disturbances, anxiety, hypervigilance. Support groups have formed in Nome and other affected communities. People share their experiences in safe spaces, away from ridicule and disbelief. For many, the validation of speaking with others who have had similar encounters is therapeutic. It confirms they are not insane, that what they experienced had some objective reality, even if that reality remains beyond current understanding. Children who report encounters face particular challenges. They struggle to articulate experiences that adults find difficult to process. Schools in affected areas have reported clusters of students with similar nightmares, drawings of large-eyed beings, stories of floating through walls. Counselors attempt to address these reports sensitively, balancing concern for the children's well-being with skepticism about the literal truth of their accounts. But when multiple children in different locations describe identical experiences, dismissal becomes more difficult. The disappearances continue. Between 2005 and 2020, At least 15 more people vanished from the Nome region under suspicious circumstances. Some cases received media attention, most did not. The families of the missing live with uncertainty. They organize searches. They post flyers. They demand investigations. But answers rarely come. Bodies are seldom recovered. Explanations are never satisfying. And the official position remains unchanged. Alaska is dangerous. People die in the wilderness. Correlation does not equal causation. One particularly disturbing case involved a married couple from Anchorage who disappeared during a camping trip in 2011. Robert and Linda Martinez were experienced outdoors enthusiasts. They had camped throughout Alaska for 15 years without incident. In August, they drove to a remote area near the Koyukuk River. They planned to spend a week fishing and photographing wildlife. They carried satellite phones, GPS devices, and emergency beacons. They filed detailed trip plans with park rangers. Everything was done correctly. On the 4th day of their trip, Robert called his brother using the satellite phone. The conversation was normal. He described the fishing. He talked about the northern lights they had seen the previous night. He mentioned that Linda had spotted something unusual in the sky, an object that moved differently than aircraft. But his tone was casual. There was no indication of distress. The call ended with plans to check in again in 2 days. That was the last anyone heard from them. When the Martinez couple failed to return as scheduled, search and rescue teams were deployed. Helicopters scanned the area. Ground teams followed the river. Their campsite was located within hours. The tent stood intact. Camping gear sat neatly arranged. Food hung properly in bear-safe containers. The satellite phone lay on a folding table, fully charged. Both GPS units were present. The emergency beacons had not been activated. But Robert and Linda were gone. Search dogs tracked their scent to a clearing about 200 yards from the camp. There, the trail ended. The dogs circled in confusion. They whined and refused to go further. Handlers noted that the animals seemed frightened. This was unusual behavior for trained search dogs. An examination of the clearing revealed flattened vegetation in a circular pattern. The grass was pressed down uniformly, as if heavy weight had rested there. Soil samples from the site showed elevated radiation levels, not enough to be dangerous, but significantly higher than background readings from surrounding areas. The Martinez family hired private investigators. They offered rewards. They appeared on news programs pleading for information. Local psychics came forward claiming to sense the couple's presence. None of it led anywhere. The investigation eventually went cold. The file remains open, but active searching has stopped. Robert and Linda Martinez joined the growing list of people who walked into Alaska's wilderness and never returned. Their families are left with questions that multiply with each passing year. Another case from 2014 involved 3 oil workers stationed at a remote drilling site near Prudhoe Bay. The men worked rotating shifts, 2 weeks on the site, then 2 weeks off. The isolation was difficult, but the pay was excellent. On a clear September night, all 3 men called their families within an hour of each other. The conversations were unremarkable. Plans were made for the upcoming time off, then communication ceased. When the shift change crew arrived 5 days later, they found the facility abandoned. Equipment was running, lights were on, coffee sat in mugs still warm, but the workers had vanished. Company security reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. The recordings showed the 3 men going about their normal routines. Then, at 11:47 inches the evening, all cameras experienced simultaneous interference. Static filled the screens for approximately 6 minutes. When the picture returned, the facility was empty. No one was seen leaving. No vehicles had departed. The men had simply ceased to exist within that 6-minute window. Company officials were baffled. They contacted authorities. They reviewed every possible explanation: equipment failure, walkouts, foul play. Nothing fit the evidence. 2 of the workers were found 3 weeks later near the town of Deadhorse, 30 miles from the drilling site. They were wandering along the road, disoriented and severely dehydrated. Neither could explain how they got there. Medical examinations showed exposure consistent with extended time outdoors. But they had no memory of walking anywhere. They remembered being at the facility, then nothing, then waking up on the roadside. The third worker was never found. Search efforts continued for months. The oil company eventually settled with his family, but settlement money does not answer questions. It does not explain how 3 men vanished from a secured facility and 2 reappeared miles away with no memory of the journey. These modern cases echo historical patterns, but they also show the phenomenon adapting. Early reports from the 1960s and 72nd described simple sightings, lights in the sky, strange objects. By the 1980s, accounts included missing time and partial memories. Now, in the 21st century, entire groups disappear despite carrying technology designed to prevent such occurrences. Satellite phones fail. GPS units provide no help. Emergency beacons remain unactivated. It is as if the phenomenon understands our technology and knows how to circumvent it. Dr. Helena Reeves, a sociologist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, has studied the social impact of these events. She notes that communities affected by disappearances develop unique coping mechanisms. Support networks form. Informal warning systems emerge. People share information about areas to avoid, times when activity seems to increase. Dr. Reeves found that residents in high-activity zones exhibit heightened awareness of their surroundings. They notice changes in animal behavior. They pay attention to atmospheric anomalies. They trust their instincts in ways that urban populations might consider paranoid. This heightened awareness sometimes provides advance warning. In 2016, residents of a small village near the Noatak River reported unusual activity in the sky, bright lights hovering over the tundra, strange humming sounds that made windows vibrate. Elders advised families to stay indoors after dark, to keep children close, to avoid traveling alone. For 2 weeks, the community essentially locked down. Then the activity stopped. No one disappeared during that period. Residents believe their caution saved lives. Skeptics call it coincidence, but those who live there know what they experienced. The financial impact on Alaska's economy is difficult to quantify but significant. Tourism declines in areas with active phenomena. Property values drop. Businesses struggle to attract employees to remote locations. Insurance companies classify certain regions as high risk. The state government rarely acknowledges these factors publicly, but internal documents obtained through information requests show concern about perception problems. Alaska relies heavily on resource extraction and tourism. Stories of alien abductions do not help either industry. Some communities have attempted to leverage the phenomena for economic benefit. UFO tours are advertised. Hotels promote their proximity to sighting hotspots. Gift shops sell alien-themed merchandise. These efforts meet mixed reactions from residents. Some see it as exploiting tragedy. Others view it as practical adaptation to circumstances beyond their control. The debate reflects larger questions about how societies process the unexplainable. Do you fear it? Profit from it? Pretend it does not exist? Religious communities in Alaska have their own interpretations. Some view the phenomena through a demonic lens, fallen angels masquerading as extraterrestrials. Others see it as a test of faith. Still, others incorporate the experiences into existing belief systems. One pastor in Nome preaches that God created many worlds, that visitors from those worlds are simply part of divine creation. His congregation includes abduction witnesses. They find comfort in a framework that acknowledges their experiences without condemning them to mental illness or delusion. The military's continued silence fuels speculation. Why does an institution that monitors airspace so carefully have nothing to say about repeated incursions? Some suggest cooperation. That agreements exist between human authorities and whoever controls these craft. Others propose infiltration, that key military positions are held by individuals who serve non-human interests. These theories sound absurd until one examines the evidence, classified documents, suppressed reports, witnesses who face career consequences for speaking out. The pattern suggests intentional concealment rather than mere ignorance. Former government officials occasionally break silence. In 2017, a retired FAA controller spoke anonymously to researchers. He described radar returns from objects performing maneuvers that defied physics, right-angled turns at supersonic speeds, instant acceleration from stationary to thousands of miles per hour. He stated that such incidents were logged but never investigated. Pilots who reported visual confirmation were told to file reports that went nowhere. The message was clear: do your job, do not ask questions, and do not expect answers. Yet the correlations persist. Disappearances spike during periods of increased UFO activity. Witnesses report seeing lights in the sky on the nights people vanish. Search teams find abandoned snowmobiles and empty campsites with no logical explanation. The patterns are there for those willing to see them, but acknowledgement would require accepting possibilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. It would require admitting that we are not alone, that we may not be in control, that something is happening in the skies above Alaska that defies our understanding. Indigenous elders are less troubled by these implications. Their worldview has always included beings from beyond. The sky people are part of the natural order, as real as caribou or wolves. The elders warn that the beings have their own purposes, that humans are subjects of study, or perhaps something more. They caution against seeking contact. The sky people take what they want. They return some and keep others. To draw their attention is dangerous. Better to respect their presence and maintain distance. Some researchers theorize that Alaska serves as a kind of laboratory, that its isolation and sparse population make it ideal for long-term observation of human subjects. If an advanced intelligence wanted to study humanity with minimal interference, rural Alaska would be a logical choice. The military presence might even be tolerated or encouraged. A controlled environment where both subjects and observers can operate with relative freedom. This theory is speculative, but not without merit. It fits the pattern of repeated encounters in the same geographic area over decades. The geological features of Alaska may also play a role. The state sits on tectonic boundaries. Volcanic activity is common. Magnetic anomalies occur throughout the region. Some researchers suggest these factors create conditions favorable to the phenomena. Weak points in the fabric of space-time. Windows through which other realities can intrude. This sounds like science fiction. But quantum physics has already demonstrated that reality is stranger than common sense suggests. If parallel dimensions exist, if wormholes are possible, then Alaska's unique geology might serve as a natural gateway. Native accounts support this interpretation. Elders describe certain locations as thin places, areas where the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. These sites were traditionally avoided or approached only with proper ritual preparation. Sacred places, yes, but also dangerous ones. The sky people were believed to use these locations as entry points. Offerings were left to maintain balance, to acknowledge the presence of these other intelligences without inviting direct contact. When European settlers arrived and ignored these traditions, the elders warned of consequences. Increased activity, more disappearances. The sky people angered by disrespect. Modern development has only intensified the situation. Mining operations dig deep into the earth. Oil drilling penetrates ancient rock formations. Military facilities generate electromagnetic fields. Each of these activities might disrupt whatever delicate equilibrium existed. If the phenomena are related to geological or dimensional factors, human activity could be amplifying them. We might be, quite literally, opening doors we do not understand and cannot control. The psychological toll extends beyond direct witnesses. Entire families are affected. Children grow up knowing their parent or sibling vanished without explanation. Spouses live in limbo, unable to grieve properly or move forward. Communities carry collective trauma, the knowledge that at any moment, anyone might be taken. This creates a baseline anxiety that mental health professionals struggle to address. How do you treat trauma when the threat remains active? When validation of fear might be more honest than reassurance? Support groups provide some relief. In Nome, a weekly gathering brings together families of the missing and abduction survivors. They meet in a church basement. Coffee and cookies are served. Stories are shared without judgment. For many attendees, this is the only place they can speak freely. The facilitator, Margaret Okonkwo, lost her husband in 1998. He went to check on fishing nets and never returned. For years, she blamed herself, wondered if she could have prevented it. The support group helped her understand she was not alone, that what happened was beyond any individual's control. Margaret has documented hundreds of cases through these meetings. She maintains files with dates, locations, and circumstances. Patterns emerge from her data. Disappearances cluster around equinoxes. They increase during periods of solar storms. Certain families seem more susceptible. Multiple members across generations reporting encounters. Margaret believes this information is crucial, that somewhere in these patterns lies understanding. She has shared her findings with researchers. Some are interested, most dismiss her work as amateur speculation. But Margaret continues, because for her and for everyone in that church basement, this is not academic, this is their lives. The impact on children deserves particular attention. Young people who witness events or lose family members develop in a context of unexplained trauma. Some become obsessed with finding answers. They study astronomy, physics, any field that might explain what they experienced. Others retreat into denial. They move away from Alaska as soon as possible. They refuse to discuss their past. Both responses are attempts to regain control over experiences that shattered their sense of safety. Schools in affected areas face unique challenges. Teachers notice students drawing strange images, writing stories about visitors from the sky, reporting nightmares that disrupt sleep and learning. School counselors attempt to address these issues, but they receive little guidance. No training covers how to handle children who claim to have been abducted by aliens. The tendency is to refer to outside mental health services, but in remote Alaska, such services are scarce. Families often cope alone. Some children display unusual abilities after encounters, enhanced memory, aptitude for mathematics or languages. One teenager in Kotzebue began speaking fluent Russian despite never studying the language. Another developed an intuitive understanding of engineering principles and built complex machines from scrap materials. Parents do not know how to explain these changes. Teachers are equally baffled. The children themselves often cannot articulate where their knowledge comes from. They just know things they should not know. These cases raise profound questions. If encounters are real, if people are being taken and returned, what happens during that missing time? The fragmentary memories recovered through hypnosis suggest examinations, procedures, communication with non-human entities. But the full truth remains inaccessible. The human mind either cannot retain these memories or actively suppresses them, perhaps as a protective mechanism. Perhaps because the experiences are too foreign to process within normal consciousness. Technology has not provided the clarity many hoped for. Despite advances in surveillance and tracking, the phenomena remain elusive. Satellites photograph Alaska constantly, yet no images of alien craft have been released. Either they are not being captured or they are being classified. Given the military's presence and the strategic importance of Alaska, the latter seems more likely. What is seen from orbit stays within classified channels. The public learns nothing. Amateur investigators attempt to fill this gap. Groups equipped with cameras, radiation detectors, and recording equipment stake out high-activity areas. Some claim to have captured evidence. Photographs of strange lights, audio recordings of unusual sounds, video footage of objects moving in ways conventional aircraft cannot. Skeptics point to the poor quality of this evidence. Grainy images prove nothing. Sounds could be misidentified. Without clear, unambiguous documentation, amateur efforts change few minds. Yet, the volume of material is impressive. Hundreds of hours of footage, thousands of photographs, detailed witness testimonies recorded on video. When examined collectively, rather than as isolated incidents, a coherent picture emerges. Something is active in Alaska's skies. It has been for decades. It interacts with humans in ways we do not fully understand, and it continues despite increased scrutiny and documentation efforts. The international dimension adds another layer. Alaska's proximity to Russia means both nations monitor the region closely. Russian military and civilian witnesses have reported similar phenomena on their side of the Bering Strait. During the Cold War, both superpowers assumed the other was responsible. Now, with collaboration between researchers in both countries, it becomes clear that neither nation controls what is happening. The phenomena operate independently of human geopolitics. They were here before the current borders were drawn. They will likely remain long after those borders change. Others suggest a more unsettling possibility, that the encounters are not observation but collection, that people are being taken for purposes we cannot comprehend. Genetic sampling, consciousness mapping, or something entirely beyond our conceptual framework. The implants found in some abductees suggest a tagging system, a way to track individuals over time. If so, the implications are profound. We may be part of an experiment we never consented to, subjects in a study conducted by intelligences indifferent to our autonomy or well-being. The Alaska cases raise questions that extend far beyond the specifics of individual encounters. If the reports are accurate, if people are truly being taken by non-human entities, what does that mean for humanity's understanding of itself? We have built civilizations on the assumption that we are the dominant intelligence on this planet, that our technology, our science, our philosophy represent the pinnacle of development. The possibility that we are being studied like laboratory animals undermines that assumption entirely. It forces us to confront the possibility that we are neither special nor sovereign, that Earth is not ours alone. Medical evidence adds credibility to witness accounts. Doctors examining abduction claimants have documented physical anomalies, scars appearing overnight with no explanation, small objects embedded beneath the skin, radiation burns consistent with exposure to unknown energy sources. In several cases, surgical removal of implants has been attempted. The objects recovered are typically small, metallic or crystalline in composition. When analyzed, they show unusual properties, isotopic ratios not found in terrestrial materials, manufacturing precision beyond current human capability. These objects are not natural. They are clearly artificial, but their purpose remains unknown. One implant removed from a Nome resident in 2008 generated particular interest. The object was roughly the size of a grain of rice. It was located in the subject's sinus cavity. The individual had no memory of how it got there. She only knew that she had been suffering from severe headaches. When an MRI revealed the foreign object, surgery was performed. The removed implant was sent to multiple laboratories for analysis. Results were consistent. The object contained a mixture of rare earth elements and isotopes in ratios that do not occur naturally. The crystalline structure suggested it was grown rather than machined. Most puzzling was its apparent function. The object emitted a weak electromagnetic signal, a pulse that varied in frequency but never stopped. Researchers attempted to decode this signal, Some believed it might contain information. Others thought it was simply a tracking beacon. The woman who had carried it reported feeling relief after its removal. The headache stopped. But she also experienced a sense of loss, as if something she had grown accustomed to was suddenly missing. She described it as losing a sense she did not know she had. When asked if she wanted the implant back, she refused, but her ambivalence was clear. Part of her wanted to understand what it had been doing. Another part was terrified of what that understanding might reveal. The debate over implants mirrors larger debates about the phenomena. Are they evidence of advanced technology or sophisticated hoaxes? Could they be naturally occurring anomalies misinterpreted as alien artifacts? H. Side Marshall's evidence. Skeptics point to the lack of clear alien technology. Where are the power sources, the communication devices? Why do these implants never do anything obviously extraordinary? Believers counter that our inability to understand their function does not prove they have none, that a medieval peasant examining a microchip would also conclude it was just an interesting rock. The truth likely falls somewhere between extremes. Some implants may be hoaxes, others might be misidentified fragments of terrestrial origin. But a subset defies easy explanation. These are the cases that keep researchers engaged. That suggests something genuine underlies the noise of false claims and mistaken identity. The challenge is separating signal from noise when both look similar at first glance. Witnesses who have been examined and found to have implants face difficult decisions. Do they keep the objects, submit them for study, have them removed? Each choice carries consequences. Keeping an implant means living with an unknown object inside your body. Studying it means subjecting yourself to invasive procedures and medical scrutiny. Removal might eliminate potential evidence, but restore a sense of bodily autonomy. There are no good answers. Only trade-offs between curiosity, fear, and the need for normalcy. The media's role in shaping public perception cannot be ignored. Sensational coverage treats abduction accounts as entertainment. Reality shows film dramatic reenactments. Documentaries present the most extreme claims without adequate verification. This approach serves ratings, but damages serious investigation. Witnesses who might come forward stay silent rather than risk becoming tabloid fodder. Researchers struggle for credibility when their subject is associated with late-night cable programming and internet conspiracy theories. Yet some journalists have approached the topic responsibly. Long-form articles in respected publications have examined Alaska cases without mockery or exaggeration. These pieces let witnesses tell their stories. They present evidence objectively. They acknowledge unknowns without demanding premature conclusions. This kind of coverage helps normalize discussion. It creates space for serious inquiry in a field plagued by ridicule and exploitation. The economic dimension extends beyond tourism. Defense contractors have studied UFO technology for decades. If even a fraction of the reported capabilities are real, the applications would be revolutionary. Propulsion systems that require no fuel, materials stronger than anything currently available, energy sources that violate known physics. Any nation or corporation that could replicate such technology would gain enormous strategic advantage. This creates incentive for secrecy. If breakthroughs have been made, they would be the most closely guarded secrets imaginable. Some researchers believe that reverse engineering efforts have succeeded, that black-budget programs have developed aircraft using principles learned from recovered alien craft. The triangular objects seen over Alaska and elsewhere might be human-built using non-human technology. This would explain why sightings continue, but official acknowledgement does not. The technology exists but remains classified. Neither confirming nor denying allows research to continue without public scrutiny or international complications. Alaska's indigenous people watch these debates with a mixture of amusement and frustration. For them, the question is not whether the sky people exist, it is how to maintain proper relationship with them. The elders teach that balance is essential. Take only what you need. Show respect for all beings. Do not disturb what you do not understand. These principles guided indigenous societies for thousands of years. They allowed coexistence with phenomena that modern society struggles even to acknowledge. When Inuit youth leave for college or careers in urban areas, they often encounter disbelief. Their accounts of home life, which include sky people as matter of fact as weather patterns, are dismissed as superstition. Anthropologists study their culture, but often miss the literal truth embedded in metaphor. Stories about beings from the stars are classified as mythology, but the elders insist these are not myths, they are history, passed down through oral tradition with the same accuracy as knowledge of hunting grounds or seasonal patterns. This cultural disconnection creates pain. Indigenous people feel disrespected when their knowledge is dismissed. They see outsiders ignoring warnings and suffering consequences. When researchers arrive seeking information, they often ask the wrong questions. They want physical evidence, scientific proof. But the elders offer something more valuable: wisdom accumulated over millennia about coexisting with forces beyond human control. That wisdom goes largely unheeded, and the disappearances continue. Skeptics will always find reasons to dismiss the evidence. Sleep paralysis explains some cases. Hoaxes account for others. The human mind is fallible. Memory is unreliable. These are valid points, but they do not address the totality of the phenomenon. They do not explain the consistency of reports across time and culture. They do not account for physical evidence or radar returns. They do not address why people who have nothing to gain and much to lose continue to come forward with their stories. The truth about what is happening in rural Alaska remains elusive. Government agencies offer no definitive answers. Scientific institutions remain skeptical. The media cycles between sensationalism and dismissal. But the people who live there know something is wrong. They see the lights, they hear the stories, they count the missing, and they wait for someone in authority to take their experiences seriously. Alaska's wilderness keeps its secrets well. The vast distances and harsh climate make investigation difficult. When something happens hundreds of miles from the nearest town, verification becomes nearly impossible. The land itself seems complicit in the mystery, swallowing evidence and witnesses alike. Perhaps that is why it continues. Perhaps that is why Alaska, more than anywhere else, remains a place where the boundaries between known and unknown blur into ambiguity. For those who have experienced encounters, no amount of skepticism will erase their memories. The fear they felt was real. The lights they saw were real. The hours they cannot account for are real. They carry the weight of experiences that have no place in consensus reality. They live with knowledge that isolates them from those who have never looked up at the wrong moment and seen something that should not exist. The vanishing villages of Alaska are not abandoned ghost towns. They are living communities haunted by something that visits in the darkness, something that takes without asking, something that leaves behind only questions, and the faint, fading hope that someday someone will provide answers. Until then, the lights will continue to appear over the tundra, people will continue to vanish, and the skies above Alaska will remain a frontier of the unexplained, where the line between myth and reality grows thinner with each passing year. What comes from above and why it chooses Alaska remains one of the most persistent mysteries of our time. The witnesses know what they saw. The missing remain gone. And somewhere in the vast darkness of the Arctic night, something is still watching,